Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. The senators and all in attendance will please stand and be led in the invocation by the Honorable L. Louise Lucas, 18th Senatorial District. Following the invocation, all will remain standing and be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America by Lindley Griffin, Calendar and Committee Clerk, Virginia Senate Clerk's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. The earnest heartfelt prayer of the righteous makes tremendous powers available. So let us bow our heads as we go to the throne of grace. Almighty God, it is in the name of your Son, Jesus, that we give thanks for the United States and its government. We hold up in prayer before you this government. We hold up in prayer before you the men and women of the Virginia Senate, the Lieutenant Governor, Madam Clerk and her staff, the Attorney General, the Governor, and all that you have placed in positions of authority. We pray and intercede for the judges of our land, for police officers, mayors, and all those that you have over governing bodies. And we pray that the Spirit of the Lord rest upon them one and all. Lord, we give thanks unto you that the good news of the gospel is published in our land. The word of the Lord prevails and grows mightily in the hearts and lives of your people. We give thanks for this land and its leaders herein. You have given us the power, the authority to govern. And for that, Lord, we say thank you. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will call the roll. All those in attendance will please record their vote aye. Clerk will close the roll.
You have a quorum, Mr. President. Senate Journal for Thursday, September 10th, 2020.
Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe moves that the reading of the journal be waived. All in favor of waiving the reading of the journal will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 29, noes 2.
Ayes 29, noes 2. The reading of the journal is waived. The clerk will report any communication from the House of Delegates. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I move we waive the reading of the communications from the House.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the communication from the House of Delegates be waived? All in favor of waiving the reading will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 30, noes 2.
Ayes 30, noes 2. The reading of the communication from the House of Delegates is waived. The clerk will report any communication from the governor.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come in the morning hour? Senior Senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask that the journal reflect that the gentleman from Russell, Senator Chafin, is away on pressing personal business.
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the journal reflect that the senator from Washington is also away on pressing personal business?
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the journal reflect that the senator from Hampton is away on pressing personal business?
Thank the senator. The journal will so reflect. Do any other senators wish to be recognized?
Mr. President, over here.
Where are we? We're close? Oh, Senator from Hanover. Sorry, being blocked. Senator
Mr.
from
President,
Hanover, Senator McDougal.
would the journal please reflect that the senator from Fauquier is away on pressing personal business?
Thank the senator. The journal will so reflect. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Senator from Northern Chesapeake, Senator Spruill.
Thank you, Mr. President. May the gentleman reflect that the gentleman from FMAC away on personal business.
Thank the senator. The journal will so reflect. Seeing no further business, clerk will call the calendar.
Senate calendar for Tuesday, September 15, 2020. Regular calendar, Senate bill on third reading. Senate Bill 5035, a bill relating to law enforcement civilian oversight body.
Junior Senator from Chesterfield, Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we pass SB 5035. Speaking to the motion.
Thank the senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 5035 is a significant part of our legislative efforts to restore public confidence and trust in our law enforcement agencies. This bill is enabling legislation, and it gives localities the opportunity to establish civilian review boards that are meaningful, independent of police departments, and that help to increase transparency and accountability for our police departments and divisions. Currently, the few CRBs in Virginia that we have are limited in power, and in essence, police departments are able to control the board's access to data and evidence. As we worked with a variety of organizations and advocates, we consistently heard the message that meaningful CRBs need to have autonomy and that they need to have subpoena power. And so this bill provides our localities the ability to give these boards subpoena power to gather and analyze information, to produce public reports, and to make informed decisions based on data and evidence. Mr. President, I urge that this body support this measure. Thank you.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5035? For what purpose, Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman rise.
Mr. President, I rise for the purpose of a question to the gentlelady from Chesterfield, I believe.
Will Senator yield for a question?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I have, in recent reviewing the bill, come to my attention on line 146 to 148. It appears that the purpose of the new number 8 is to remove the extensive multi-part grievance process that we have worked on for the last couple of decades to police officers who fall within this category. Is it the purpose of the bill to remove the multi-step grievance policies that we've put into place for just the individuals that are mentioned in 9.1?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would answer that, yes, the removal of the grievance process is just for those localities that implement the CRBs. Otherwise, the Law Enforcement Procedural Act stays in place for any locality that has not adopted a CRB.
Further question?
Mr. President, just speaking briefly to that.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this is not an area of legislation I normally get involved in, but I could not help but see that what we are about to do is going to be monumental in regards to the ability of a police officer to go through the normal and prepared grievance policy that we have really kind of had a hallmark on for many years. As I understand it, basically the line 146 through 148, and what I've heard from the gentlelady, the patron, is that that's actually the intent, is that these individuals will not have available to them our multi-step grievance policies. I have a number of other concerns about the bill, Mr. President, but I did not know coming into this that we were actually going to eliminate that grievance policy, and that I think should be somewhat troubling to us as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Staff, rise?
Mr. President, will the gentlelady from Chesterfield yield for a quick question?
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, if you could ask the gentlelady from Chesterfield, in her statement she said we need to reinstill trust in our police departments. Has she personally lost trust in her police department?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think from the past few months that we have seen in terms of not just what's happening in Virginia, but throughout this country, that there is a deep anxiety about our policing departments and about the ways in which law enforcement procedures have occurred against many, many members of our communities. It's not a matter of losing trust in our police department so much as feeling the depth of anxiety, the depth of voicelessness, and the inability to represent themselves effectively that's of concern for so many community members. We would not have seen the issues and concerns, the marches in the streets, if we did not have this relationship, a strong relationship between communities and law enforcement. Law enforcement is here for public safety, for ensuring that there is community trust and relationship, and we need to restore that relationship, and it's missing in the hearts of many, many community members.
Further question?
Mr. President, if the gentlelady will yield for one more question.
Will Senator Yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
And Mr. President, if you could ask the gentlelady from Chesterfield, has she, back to my original question, has she lost trust in her police department and sheriff's office? That was my original question. I'd like to ask that question again and see if we can get to that answer.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would answer that the experience of one individual is hardly reflective of the experiences of broader communities and of individuals throughout this country. I, myself, am not a victim of police action. I have not engaged with policing concerns in the way that so many of my friends and my neighbors have. I don't have to worry when my child goes out on the street whether they will be stopped by a police officer and whether or not they will come home. However, many of my black friends and neighbors have shared with me their heartache that every time their child leaves the house, they are deeply concerned about what action might take place against their child, that they caution their children. I'm not here in this body to represent myself. I'm here to represent my constituents and the citizens of Virginia, and I'm speaking on their behalf, not mine. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Further question?
Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, once we start giving a civilian body oversight and subpoena authority, and the authority to trump that of the known professionals, without understanding in depth and in detail what it's like to be one of those professionals who puts their life on the line every single day, I question that. Mr. President, let me give you an example of that. Last week we passed a bill that said a police officer has to say stop or I'll shoot. Well, I've got to tell you, after having a weapon pointed at me and talking to many law enforcement individuals who have, there's really not time to say stop or I'll shoot. When somebody's shooting at you, you don't have time to say stop or I'll shoot. That was a bad idea to pass that bill, in my opinion. And in my opinion, it's a bad idea to pass this bill. There are things in this bill that undermine the authority of our police departments, of our sheriff's agencies. And Mr. President, frankly, I think we need to take a hard look at what we're doing here. We came here saying we're going to focus on the budget, COVID-related issues, and police reform. And what we've done is we've dismantled our police departments. We've given police morale and the morale of our sheriff's offices, we've just decimated it. We've popped the bubble and we've made it so folks don't want to go into that field. And I've got to tell you, first of all, putting your life on the line every day for people you've never met, it takes a lot to do that. And they're not doing it for the pay, let me tell you that. They're doing it for the love of their community. And Mr. President, when we start picking it apart and dismantling it in this way, we start giving an outside civilian organization subpoena authority over them and the ability to hire and fire and usurp the process that we've set up, we call our judicial system. If you have a complaint against the police officers or you're not happy with the way you're being arrested, that's why we have a complaint system that goes through our judicial system. We're usurping the entire system here. And I can't support this bill, Mr. President, and frankly, I'm appalled at what we've done to our police departments, our sheriff, and our law enforcement in this body, not last week and the week before, but this week and what we're about to do. I think it's ridiculous what we're doing. And that's why I'm going to vote no against this and every other bill that usurps the authority of our law enforcement, our police departments, our sheriff's office, and truly destroys an entire community of law enforcement who are there to serve and protect us. Thank you very much.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speak to the bill.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, I always try and read the legislation before I vote on it, and I read this, of course, and I think it's important to point out to the body and also to those folks that are watching on video exactly what this bill does, and I think the gentlelady described it accurately. A locality may establish a civilian oversight body. A law enforcement civilian oversight body established pursuant to this section may have the following duties, and it then enumerates, I believe it's 7 separate sections, which the oversight that it can have. In other words, our local jurisdictions which hire the police chiefs, which establish the police departments, which fund the police departments with help from this body, they will decide the parameters of the Civilian Review Board. Not us. They will do it. So before anybody thinks that we're throwing all the police departments under the bus, and I trust my police department, but I'm not here, as the gentlelady said, speaking for everyone in my Senate district, other than this just gives the locality the ability to do it and sets parameters under which they can establish this review board. That's all it does. The local body will make that decision. I think it's critical to understand that point before we vote on this bill. Thanks.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to ask a question of the patron.
Senator Yield for a question.
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask the patron, have you actually been on a ride-along with your local police departments?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would respond that I have not had the opportunity in Virginia to do so, but I have participated previously in Georgia. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Further question?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to speak against this bill, please.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I respect every legislator here and their ability to cross professions, I'm just questioning the intent and purpose. You know, if we need to be talking to our law enforcement officers and getting their input on these bills. I understand the intent, I think, here, but I think it's important that if we patron bills, that we actually talk to those professionals in whom this bill would impact, specifically our law enforcement. And Mr. President, I have grave concerns that we have civilians who are not necessarily law enforcement making decisions that would impact our law enforcement officers and their ability to do their job and the tools that they would use, Mr. President. And for this and a number of reasons, I'm going to stand once again with our law enforcement, and I'm going to stand with the Internal Affairs Department that already addresses some of the concerns that our communities have concerning some law enforcement officers who should retire. But I think it's very imperative, Mr. President, that if we're going to patron a bill, that it would be imperative that, you know, we participate in a ride-along so we understand our district that we represent and the law enforcement officers that will be impacted by this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from James City County, Senator Norman, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak against the bill.
Senators, the floor.
One of the things that I've learned over the years that under exigent circumstances, sometimes in a moment of hyperbole, we pass some of the worst legislation that has egregious impact. And I believe that we as a legislative body should never pass broad, sweeping legislation that significantly changes and undermines any system in a moment of panic. And I think we forget, while we have been blessed with limited egregious circumstances in Virginia from law enforcement, and I don't say that it has been totally without incident, but we certainly have been blessed to not have what some other states have experienced. I think it's very important to be mindful why the atmospheric conditions exist today as they do. It is because the police officers and law enforcement all across Virginia have been called out in moments of civil disobedience to prevent property damage, to prevent personal damage, and that they are standing there on the front lines. And the individuals that have come out under circumstances that have not happened in Virginia have tried to burn down police precincts, have thrown bricks and sent 3 of our Capitol police officers to the hospital, have discharged Roman candles at them, and at the same time, we expect these law enforcement individuals to stand there and continue to take the abuse. And that's what they are trained for, and we have passed sweeping legislation dealing with de-escalation training, which I think is going to have a significant impact. I listened to the comments about the word may, and back in a long time ago when I taught in law school to third-year students, one of the things I'd emphasize is that words mean something. Words mean something, and many times in this body we have discussed the distinction between the permissive word of may and the obligatory word of must. And I must say that I get no comfort with the fact that this is permissive, and that is because I live in the world of reality. What I can tell you is some of these same individuals who are out there participating in the mob desecrating Virginia Commonwealth University, who are throwing bricks, who are setting fires, who just recently protested in front of the City Hall in Richmond because they did not want the City Council to accept a federal grant, a portion of which would go to law enforcement, and they wanted City Council to change the funding to go to mental health. Mental health is most appropriate, but these are going to be the same people who out there who put the graffiti going down Broad Street, who tried to storm the mayor's apartment in downtown Broad Street. They are going to be the ones that are screaming at local government saying, you must, not you may, you must adopt these citizen review boards. And you know what? I have said this many, many times. Nothing scares an elected official more than a registered voter in an election season. Right, Mr. President? So, yes, it may, the may word is there, but there is going to be incredible pressures placed on them. And what's going to happen? You're going to create a citizen board that has unparalleled authorities that we've never seen in Virginia. You're going to see boards that can make a recommendation on the career of a law enforcement officer, and they know nothing about law enforcement other than they treated me poorly when I was out there writing vulgar words on the Lee Monument. And they are going to insist on some egregious punishments against law enforcement because there are those who believe no matter what the circumstances are in Richmond, for instance, you cannot use tear gas, you cannot use rubber bullets, you cannot use these bean bags, and Lord forbid that you would use a baton to protect yourself. You talk about de-escalation. I suggest to you that this is much more insidious than the altruistic purposes that have been advocated adopting this bill. And then, Mr. President, you're an extraordinary lawyer and much more gifted and experienced than I would ever hope to be. But we're going to take
Can the Senator pause right there?
I'll write that in November.
All right, please continue.
But we're going to give them, the power to bring in witnesses, the equivalency of a subpoena power. When have we ever done that to a group of citizens like this? I suggest to you that I appreciate what the gentlelady's thoughts are on this. I've started to slip and say the word motives, but we never do that. So I apologize for even letting that thought cross my mind. I do think that she means well, but the practicality and the implementation of this has the potential to be horrendous. And we don't think of things a lot of times in the General Assembly in the aggregate effect. We look at one bill and we debate it and we think about it and we vote on it. And all too frequently, we do not look at the whole parameter of universe of what we're doing. And I suggest to you that I know there are other members of this body who have checked with law enforcement to find out what is going on within certain law enforcement agencies. Back in mid-August, I checked with the Virginia State Police, and that week, 43 resignations. If you believe anything that the local Richmond media propagates, last week they indicated that in one day, 16 officers had transferred from Richmond into Henrico. You see what's happening with the Capitol Police. We had a little dialogue last week on that. Capitol Police, they're not leaving because they're under any kind of criticism or what someone might misrepresent. They're going for other opportunities because they don't want to stand out there on the front line having bricks, concrete, and fireworks thrown at them and saying you got to stand down. We are going in Virginia, and honestly, I'm very empathetic what has happened to some of these unsuspecting, ill-treated minorities in other states. I have enormous compassion, and as a practitioner of law, I am outraged. I am outraged. But by the same token, I am concerned primarily what's going to happen in Virginia, and we are going to continue to see a significant migration of good, qualified, trained police officers who are going to migrate out of the profession because they think that the legislature, in a moment of hysteria, is going to undermine them in every way. Mr. President, one thing I learned a long time ago, never believe your own press clippings, and very rarely believe that when you say something on the floor of the Senate that it changes one vote. But you know what? I will sleep better tonight having vented just a little bit because this is a subject. I have ridden with the police many, many times. I interact with them every day of my professional career. I have represented many, many law enforcement officers, not for egregious circumstances where they mistreated an inmate or a defendant, but for other reasons. I know these people. I know them professionally. I know them personally. And this is just not a good direction.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from King George, Senator Stewart, rise?
Mr. President, would the gentlelady yield for a question or two?
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Gill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having read this substitute from the Committee on Finance several times, I'm not sure exactly who or which groups this would apply to. I see it excludes deputy sheriffs. I think it excludes the chief of police. But I would ask the gentlelady, can she tell me exactly which police departments this bill would apply to?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for this opportunity to clarify who the bill applies to, because another senator previously stated that this would also affect our sheriffs. Sheriff departments are not included in this CRB, so I wanted to clarify that. This particular definition of law enforcement agencies in terms of those communities, those localities that will establish CRBs, applies to police departments and campus police in the public universities that have established a CRB. So if a locality has chosen to establish a CRB, then it would apply to those police departments and campus police within that locality. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator. Further question?
Gentlelady, yield for another question.
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator yield, you have the floor.
I'd ask the gentlelady, does it apply to the state police, to game wardens, to Marine police, to the DCR, to the Capitol Police, or any of those agencies, auxiliary police officers?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this bill is limited to localities and police departments. We deliberately did not include the Virginia State Police and those other agencies that he referred to. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator. Further question?
Another question, Mr. President.
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator yield, you have the floor.
So based upon that, in the 28th district, which I represent, I have a small police department up in Aquia, and then I represent a large part of Prince William County. Those are the only two police departments, as I understand it. Prince William Police would be affected, or could be affected, most likely would be affected, and then perhaps that Aquia Police Department. Is that correct?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would say yes in response to the senator's questions.
Further question?
Yield for another question, Mr. President.
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would ask the gentlelady, as I read this bill and I looked at line 71, and it talks about subpoena power. It says the locality shall establish the policies and procedures for the performance, et cetera, et cetera. The oversight body may hold hearings, and if after making a good faith effort to obtain voluntarily the attendance of witnesses, production of books, papers, evidence necessary to perform its duties. And it goes on to say if you can't get those people or the things, then you can get the court and they'll force them to come in. My question to the gentlelady is, what are the limitations on this body's subpoena power and or evidentiary gathering capabilities, or are there any limits to it?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond that the subpoena power extends to the good faith effort to gather the materials, gather the information, gather the individuals that are necessary in order to make an appropriate decision on the issue at hand. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Further question?
Another question, please, Mr. President.
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would ask the gentlelady where it says in the substitute that it is limited to the issue at hand.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would just refer back to the language in the bill that the oversight body may hold hearings and make a good faith effort to subpoena those individuals and those materials that are necessary to make a decision on the issue that is in front of that oversight body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further question?
I thank the gentlelady. Speaking to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, the problem with this bill, one of the big problems is there is no limitation on the issue at hand. So if you read Section 71, there is nothing that limits this oversight body's ability to gather evidence or information from any citizen in the Commonwealth. And I mean, to give you an example, suppose I have a row with a local police department and I'm in a ruckus with them and I make a complaint. This oversight body can investigate me for political reasons or for whatever else. This body has full authority to subpoena or get my tax records, my records from my daily movements, my business transactions. They may be able to get into my client's information. I don't know. It's frankly unconscionable. And while I understand what the gentlelady is trying to do in helping our citizens, I actually believe that that part alone could end up injuring more citizens and people in our community than you could ever imagine. Anytime you give a civilian board like this with no training, with no direction, and I have a good idea what this board, how this board will be comprised, they're going to go on witch hunts for people. And they're not going to be limited to police officers. And this is a really, 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 really dangerous concept. And I suspect I know what the vote is going to be, but I want everybody in here to know what you're voting for. Because you're giving a civilian body the power to get into your records if they don't like you. Or if they have some sort of gripe with you, and we should not give that away. It's an invasion of privacy. It is a denial of our constitutional rights to start with. And I hope you all will think about that. Also to the bill, Mr. President, I have to say this because I agree with the gentleman from James City County. Last night I watched the late news because I'm coming to Richmond so much. I worked until about 10 o'clock last night, and I was able to catch the 11 o'clock news. And I hadn't seen it for a while. And I witnessed the shooting of those two officers in that car. And that person, they played the video over and over again, walking up to that police car and shooting the one woman in her jaw, shooting the other guy, other police officer in his chest, and he ran away. And I couldn't believe it. But that wasn't bad enough. They rushed those two officers to the hospital, and there were folks out there, rather radical-looking folks, in the hospital, blocking the entrance to the hospital for people to come and go, trying to take care of these police officers, and they were dressed in Black Lives Matter clothing, and they were chanting, "I hope the MFers die. I hope the MFers die." And it made me so sad to think that our community has come to that, Mr. President. And somehow or another, we got to fix this and reel this thing in, because we can't have people out there screaming, "We want to kill the police. All the police must die." And then we're adopting bill after bill after bill after bill after bill to punish the police broadly across the board. Mr. President, there are a few bad policemen out there, and we all know that. And we've seen the effects of that. But by and large, we have really, really good police officers who give their lives to protecting us, taking care of us, and making sure our communities are safe. And I know there are bad cops out there. There are bad lawyers out there. There are bad doctors out there. There are bad teachers. There are bad people in every profession. We have got to stop throwing this broad blanket over all of the police in this community and try to figure out how to root out the bad ones, because that's how we're actually going to do something. What this is going to end up doing, you'll make all the police quit. They're all just going to say, "I've had enough. I get the emails every day. I can't take it any longer. My wife wants me to retire. They're afraid somebody's going to shoot me." These are the good officers that we want to stay. These bills are forcing them out, and you're going to end up with the bad ones, who are the only ones that want to stay. And I had to say that. I know it's not going to change a vote. But like the senator from James City County, this is really concerning me. we can't get good qualified candidates to be a police officer anymore. It's getting impossible. The good officers are retiring because they're tired of being treated this way. They don't think the General Assembly has the support for them as they had hoped, and we're going to end up losing all these good people, and what you're going to have left are bad candidates. The very police you're trying to root out, you're going to end up keeping in and getting rid of the good ones. So I hope you'll vote against this bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Arlington, Senator Favola, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask the body to support this bill. And I guess I'm concerned that there seems to be an expectation local governments will overreach with this tool. And I just want to remind the body that police departments, in fact, report to mayors. They report to city managers. They report to county executives. Members of the city council, members of the boards of supervisors are ultimately responsible for funding the police, for ensuring that the police have an adequately responsible work environment. And yes, the local officials are held accountable by the voters, and local officials are expected to keep the streets safe, to ensure that schools open in safe zones, and all the things that you and I value in our communities, our local government is responsible for. This is just a tool that local government can use. They would have to adopt the procedures in a public fashion at a public hearing. And in my view, the values and attitudes of the jurisdiction that elected these local officials will guide the actual framework that will establish the Civilian Review Board. And the way I read the language, in fact, the Civilian Review Board will only be granted the power, if you will, that the locality chooses to have the Civilian Review Board exercise. So there is some judgment here, and the local government will have to balance law and order issues with the possibility and hopefully the desirability of having more transparency and accountability. I think this is an okay thing to do. In fact, Fairfax does have a Civilian Review Board, and it has enhanced the relationship between those who are being policed with the police officers. So I think we can take a chance. I believe our localities will use this tool responsibly. I would like to give them this tool. We should not be afraid of allowing our constituents to have a conversation about policing matters. So I ask the body to vote for this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, rise to speak briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, as I listened to the debate, and I think as the senator from King George indicated, the minds of this body are probably already made up. But there's one statement that I did want to push back on. And Mr. President, we are all beneficiaries of our experience and our history, and this body has a wide and varied history. Mine is one, starting off as an attorney. I was in private practice for a while, and then I was a prosecutor. Mr. President, during that time as prosecutor, you get to know the people you work with. You get to know law enforcement. Play softball with them. You go to eat with them. You spend the majority of your day with those individuals because you are working for a common goal. Mr. President, as you get to know them, you also get to know their families. And I can't tell you the number of times that family members express they just don't know if their spouse, their boyfriend, girlfriend, brother is coming home. Mr. President, Y'all might have remembered that just right up the street, a trooper didn't come home. Mr. President, one of the people that I worked with, he came home, but he's going to have to live with the disability for his entire life. And I watched how that affected his family, how it affects his family yet today. So, Mr. President, as we're having these debates and conversations, certainly our citizens have a high expectation of our law enforcement officers, and they should. But our law enforcement officers go out every day into situations that they don't ask to be in, that they do not create, that are dangerous and hostile, to make our lives better, to make those people's lives better. One of the most dangerous situations a law enforcement individual can enter into is a domestic dispute. That is the highest number of calls and the most dangerous. Oftentimes there's substances involved, there's certainly emotions involved. And when that call comes in, that officer doesn't say, you know, I really want to go home to my family tonight, so I'm not going to show up. So, Mr. President, as we're having this discussion, I hope that the members of this body will remember that our law enforcement officers and their families are out there putting their lives on the line to protect Virginians, to protect us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I've done a bunch of ride-alongs, starting with when I was a city councilman in the city of Chesapeake and then as vice mayor, while I served in the House of Delegates, and now in the Senate. So yeah, we've done ride-alongs, but believe me, you're not going to go to the ride-along that really puts you in danger, because they won't take you. The last thing they're going to want to do is have an elected official hurt on a ride-along. But even in the mediocre ride-alongs we've done, you can see the danger that our police officers are exposed to every day. A couple of problems with this bill. Number one, it states in here that no employee of a law enforcement agency can be on one of these review boards. All right, there's an ace out of the deck. It also says the boards can retain legal counsel, and those fees must be paid by the locality for appropriated money from that locality. Whoop, there's another ace in the deck. This bill is being passed in a session unlike any we've ever seen before. We have not had the opportunity for committees to meet and for law enforcement to be present and to make their feelings known. Last week we dealt with the bill. We were told, hey, law enforcement's fine with this. Well, guess what? They had a press conference that day, said, no, we're not. I hope if you vote for this bill, you'll be able to look a local police officer in the eye and tell them why you voted for this. We don't need this in Virginia. We are stacking the deck, and we shouldn't take a chance. Russian roulette is taking a chance. But this bill should never have been brought forth in this abbreviated, cloistered session without the ability of law enforcement to come to committee and come to the local legislators and let them know their feelings on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the Senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain, rise?
Mr. President, speaking of the bill,
Senator has the floor.
You know, a couple of things I want to point out about this. One, everybody knows the power that's being given to these civilian review boards. It's the power to make binding decisions. And it lists the decisions that these boards can make to reprimand, to suspend, to demote, to reassign, to terminate, and even gives them the power to order involuntary restitution. You know, I heard somebody say Fairfax has review boards. Well, let me tell you, it doesn't have review boards like this. It does not have a review board that can make this kind of life-altering decision for members of law enforcement. It's an advisory board, and I commend Fairfax County for creating an advisory board. I think that serves an important purpose, and I would like to see more communities in Virginia adopt advisory review boards. You know, when I first read this bill, I thought, you know, for heaven's sakes, it doesn't include any qualifications necessary for service on this. But I find that criticism is unfair because it does have a qualification requirement in it. And the qualification is you can't be qualified. You may not be in law enforcement. You can't be somebody who understands what this job requires. We are not going to allow people in law enforcement, people who have had training, people who understand the rules, the procedures and guidelines under which members of local police departments operate, making those decisions. And what we are doing is we are placing in the hands of unqualified people, you know, hopefully, you know, they will, and I heard somebody say, I think a senator from Arlington said, I trust local government. Well, if we trusted local government, why not just let them decide who gets to serve on there? Even putting a chief of police or another active member of law enforcement on there so that there is some perspective. But no, we're not going to trust local government to make those decisions with this bill. And we're inviting these civilian review boards with these vast powers to sit in the comfort of a conference room after an event that may have involved tense, rapidly moving circumstances and split-second decisions to engage in the kind of 20/20 hindsight that most police officers would love to have out on the street doing their job. And I would hope that we would take a break, take a deep breath, push pause, and let this bill go by. Let's let it die for this session. Let's talk about it and maybe come back and look at a bill that allows law enforcement officers to serve on these, or a bill that creates advisory civilian review panels, not civilian review panels that allow these panels, subpoena power, the power to make termination decisions, involuntary restitution decisions, and other decisions that it just isn't qualified to make. So I would hope that members would cast a no vote.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Would the gentleman from James City County yield for a question?
Will the Senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I'd ask the gentleman if he has faith and confidence in the Board of Supervisors in James City County collectively to make decisions.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond that I have confidence in them, especially when I was chairman of it.
Thank the Senator. Further question?
Would the gentleman yield for a further question?
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Would the gentleman agree with the old adage that those closest to the governed govern best?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, my response would be with some constraints that are reasonable and responsible to the responsible citizens they represent.
Senator has the floor. Further
Mr.
question?
President, I beg the senator's pardon. I could not hear his answer.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I said that I do agree with that as long as it is tempered by responsible citizens that they represent as opposed to mobs.
I thank the senator. Would the senator yield for one final question?
Senator Yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
I would ask the senator that he began his comments, which I listened carefully to, with the point that words mean something. And does the senator understand that in several areas of this legislation, the word may is used, that the local city council or board of supervisors may create this civilian review board, and perhaps the senator's justifiable angst against the creation of this body may be better stated to that local governing board who has to ultimately decide whether or not to create it.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I probably am not as cerebral and as articulate as a junior senator from Richmond, but I can give him some comfort that I am very familiar with the difference between may and what that implies and what the mandatory word of must means and implies. And what I would say is, and I mean no disrespect to the jurisdiction that the senator represents, but if I look at the city of Richmond as an example, I feel very comfortable based upon the civil disobedience and protest that has taken place on Monument Avenue while curiously law enforcement has stood by, and I said stood by, not stand down, because words mean something. As I have observed that, as I have observed citizens trashing the John Marshall Courts building over the resumption of evictions because they think it's inappropriate, as I have observed them trying to storm the mayor's apartment, as I have observed them trashing Broad Street, West Broad Street, as I've observed the civil disobedience of sitting down in the streets, trying to set fires to police stations, burning public property, I have concerns because they are going to be the vocal groups that are going to be insisting upon having City Council in Richmond adopt every provision of this legislation, even though it may say may, because that mob is going to interpret may in their mind as must.
I thank the senator. Speaking briefly to the measure,
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I've listened carefully to my colleagues, and many of them have decried the violence that's occurred, particularly in the capital city. And I couldn't agree with them more. Senator Stewart made a wonderful point when he talked about the disgraceful and disgusting remarks made by protesters who went to the hospital where two law enforcement officers in Los Angeles were attacked by gunfire and said, "I hope the MFers die." I mean, it's beyond disgusting. It's beyond unchristian. It's beyond unseemly. It's unforgivable. In Richmond, which my colleague from James City County referred to, he's right. Going down Monument Avenue and trashing people's homes and cars because they have the temerity to simply live near Lee Circle is horrific. To destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars of plate glass windows at the John Marshall Courts building and VCU, it's inexplicable. I guess I get the connection between John Marshall Courts building, not that I agree with it, but what about VCU destroying that glass? And then businesses. I purposely drove down downtown Richmond yesterday to get a better look at some of the buildings. Many of them are boarded up because of the carnage. vehicles, city vehicles, and private citizens' vehicles are destroyed, set on fire. There is no excuse for it. Our local newspaper, some of you may have heard about it, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, opined and wondered why certain people from my side of the aisle weren't speaking out against it. I wrote a scathing op-ed piece denouncing those people that were engaging in violent protest. I made it abundantly clear they should be arrested, they should be charged, they should be prosecuted, they should be jailed. They didn't print that op-ed piece. And I think and I hope that more people from my side of the aisle will decry it. But here's what I don't get. I'm having a hard time seeing the link between Senator Stewart's comments about those people making comments to those police officers that were in surgery, Senator McDougal's comments about the police officers that were being put in harm's way. All of that is true. But I'm having a hard time to see the nexus between that and the creation, if the local governing body is desirous of doing it, of establishing a civilian review board. Everything they said about the horrible way police are being treated is right. But I don't see the nexus between giving the locality, those closest to the governed, the right to establish a CRB. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purposes does the senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Surville, rise?
Speaking to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator, it's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good to see you today, this afternoon.
Good to see you.
So I tried to do a ride-along in the last 2 months, but they wouldn't let me because of this virus. So I did the next best thing. I sat down with the senator from Prince William County. We met with about 8 police officers and talked to them about what they thought. We got some ideas. We made some changes and some legislation based on that. I've probably talked with about 5 or 6 police chiefs and sheriffs, maybe 7 or 8 now, in the last 2 months as we work through this process. I practice criminal defense, just like the senator from James City County. I've probably watched hundreds of videos of police-civilian encounters. It doesn't obviously put you right there in the car all the time, but it does give you a bit of perspective about what goes on, and having tried cases for 24 years involved in these issues, it gives you some perspective. And so I don't consider myself completely uninformed about this, but I have seen a lot. This last week I was in court as we try to here juggle our personal and professional lives with coming down here 2 days a week. And a couple of my criminal defense lawyer friends came up to me and said, "What are you guys doing with qualified immunity?" And I said, "It's dead." And they said, "You know, I've had 3 or 4 officers come up to me and tell me that if that passes, they're quitting." And I said, "Well, you can tell them that it's not passing. We took care of that." I had another officer came up to me I had a case with, and I'd had prior cases, and he came up to me and he said, "I saw you put in that assault by police officer thing, bill." And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, "Yeah, a couple of my guys were complaining to me about that." He said, "But I went and looked at it, and it wasn't that bad." And he said, "I can't tell you how many stupid cases I've seen my colleagues bring that they never should have been brought. And I saw the amendments you made, and the amendments look okay to me, and I've been telling people that. I don't see what the big deal is about it." There's a lot of misinformation out there, folks, and I'm concerned that a little bit of this floor debate is spreading even more of it, okay? So, first of all, I just want to talk about the Law Enforcement Procedural Guarantee Act. I know the senator from Bedford brought that up. If you look at the Law Enforcement Procedural Guarantee Act and you compare it with the process created by the Civilian Review Board, they're totally incompatible. You can't have both. It's impossible to have both apply at the same time. And so that's why it has to be one or the other if you choose to engage in one of these more robust Civilian Review Board models with hiring and firing. That's why that had to come out. With regard to the subpoena power issue, first of all, if you look at the enabling legislation, somewhere in here, I can't remember which line it's on, but it says that the board may retain counsel or have an attorney. There's going to be an attorney sitting next to these folks as they make their decisions, just like there are with every other local government body. And I guarantee you that if they start pushing an envelope to a place where the lawyer don't like, the lawyer's going to have something to say about it. And in my experience, most of these, well, I can't speak for some places like, for example, the city of Portsmouth, but many other boards I've ever seen, they seem to listen to their lawyers and not push the envelope, especially when they're all civilians and not elected officials. I would also note that on line 74, if you're looking for a limitation on their power to issue subpoenas, it says that they may issue these subpoenas necessary to perform their duties. And I would say if you're looking for limitations, just look at the bill, because the bill describes their duties. And so if somebody wants to issue a subpoena, they're going to have to walk down to court, they're going to have to talk to a judge, they're going to have to point at a particular part of that statute that says this relates to this part of our duty to justify the issuance of that subpoena. And the judge will act as a check and balance. If somebody who's receiving that subpoena doesn't like it, the bill says they have an opportunity to file a motion to quash and come in and dispute the validity of the breadth or whatever that subpoena. There are checks and balances to prevent some board from going wild. Probably 2 or 3 different checks and balances. Besides the fact that the locality can even choose whether to do this or whether to even give them this power. I would also note there's been some talk about how police aren't allowed to sit on here. I want to make this clear. Current, active, employed police on the same department are not allowed to sit on here. But there's nothing prohibiting a deputy sheriff who lives in the same county from sitting on, who's employed from sitting on here, if it's reviewing the police department of a different, in the same locality, if they're not employed by that police department. There's nothing prohibiting retired police officers from sitting on here. I suspect, although I haven't heard from the gentlelady, but the purpose of prohibiting sitting law enforcement officers from reviewing their colleagues is because there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there, and it might be hard to go back and serve with your friends if you just voted to throw your friend off the force. So there's definitely conflict issues that arise from that situation when you're working with the same people every day in the exact same job, especially if you're dealing with smaller departments. I would note that civilian review boards are in use. You already heard about Fairfax. I believe there's one in either Charlottesville or Albemarle. The city of Virginia Beach even has one. They founded theirs in 1991. They have a civilian board that reviews internal investigation complaints. And they have a whole website about it. You can go read it. They have a copy of the ordinance from 1991. Apparently, the City Council of Virginia Beach hasn't done anything about changing it. They're so happy with it. But I almost have another list of about 100 different localities around the country that have done these. We're not like plowing new ground or inventing something radical here. This is existing policy all around the country, and dozens and dozens and dozens of these around the country already have subpoena power. This is not anything fancy or unusual. Now, I would also say, I also heard that law enforcement here is appalled at what we've been doing here. I'm not sure what session people have been attending, but at least at the Courts of Justice, or the Judiciary Committee meeting that I heard, where we discussed the Senator from Hampton's Senate Bill 5030, I didn't hear any complaints from law enforcement about what we were doing. And I heard them at a press conference the other day where they actually applauded the Senate and the Senate's treatment of this legislation. So I'm not really clear, like, what debate some people are referencing when we're talking about how things we're doing here are causing all these problems. From my perspective, if there's problems that are going on, it's because there's been a long-term investment in political discord and racial discord in this country, and those chickens are coming home to roost right now. There's a man with orange hair who every single chance he gets to open his mouth to cause problems for his own political gain, to try and gin up something for a presidential election, is causing a lot of these problems. A lot of statements that he makes. I'll be happy to yield in just a minute. And so I would suggest that if folks are looking for a cause of all the unhappiness, of all the anger, of all the problems, look across the river and look at what's happening over there, and maybe start to condemn some of the things that are coming out from across the river. Maybe start to try to do something to heal our state, to heal our country. Because right now, the bills that we're passing, the things we're doing to allow civilians to have more say in how things are done, are helping to clean up a lot of the mess that's been created by 400 years of bad policy that are being put on steroids by this person across the river. And I think the legislation we're passing, including the Civilian Review Board, is actually going to bring peace to this Commonwealth. It's going to make our law enforcement agencies stronger. It's going to make our localities trust them. It's going to make us root out our bad apples. It is going to give us stronger law enforcement, and it's not going to cause all the problems and all the doom and gloom that we're hearing from the other side.
For purpose, Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator from Southeast Fairfax yield briefly?
Will Senator yield?
I will yield it from Eastern Fairfax. My predecessor was Southeastern Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, has the floor.
Those of us that have followed the salutations notice they don't always follow the same districts. But, Mr. President, I was listening as it was suggested that there might have been disinformation about some of these proposals, and some of this debate's gone far afield. But I just want to ask regarding the bill regarding felony assault on a police officer, and I understand it's more complicated than some people might suggest, but where was the first place that it was referred to simply as defelonize assault on a police officer?
Senator, has the floor.
I would note that was probably in a press release.
Further question?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator
Do you
Yield.
know where,
Senator Saravel? Yield.
I yield.
Yield. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask the senator, what organization released that press release?
Senator, has the floor.
I would point out this caucus did, and it was actually consistent with the legislation that was originally introduced.
Further question?
Just speaking briefly.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, I think that part of the reason there was so much heartache over that bill was because it was simply highlighted as defelonize assault on a police officer, which is something that would distress a lot of folks. And it wasn't something that any of us characterized that more complex legislation so simply. That was something that came out from a press release from the caucus that advanced that legislation. So I don't think it's fair to suggest that any of us have spread disinformation about that bill. And I don't think that's fair, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
What purpose? Senator from Rockingham. Senator Obenshane, rise.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, rise for a question.
Will Senator yield?
I'll yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would ask the gentleman from Eastern Fairfax, did I hear him accurately explain that the bill as written does not prevent a member of law enforcement, but it simply prevents a member from that particular law enforcement agency from serving on a citizens review board?
Senator, has the floor.
Was that the assertion?
Mr. President, I would say that is what I said, and now looking at the legislation more carefully, I could see where he's going with this, and I would say that any person who's currently employed by a law enforcement agency is ineligible to serve, but it does not prohibit people from serving if they are retired law enforcement.
Further question?
I would ask the gentleman, is he retracting that bit of misinformation about this bill?
Senator, has the floor.
I'd be happy to retract it and come over and give the gentleman a hug for correcting me before I get in big trouble.
I just...
No
ride-alongs
There'll be
either.
no hugs. Senator, has the floor. For what purpose is the senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the junior senator from Chesterfield yield for a question on her bill, please?
Will Senator yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
Senator yields. You have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon,
Nice to see
Senator.
you, sir.
Good to see you.
Mr. President, I'd ask the gentlelady that, understanding that last week and on a couple of occasions I tried to introduce legislation that would prohibit collective bargaining when it came to local police and local law enforcement, can she tell me, and that those bills were defeated almost by a party line vote with the exception of one, can she tell me that if then at the local level collective bargaining is allowed to occur, which then allows the local police department to enter into collective bargaining agreements, and those collective bargaining agreements then include a methodology or a process of discipline, how would that coincide with the civilian oversight body if they were in conflict in the determination of misconduct of a particular police officer?
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond by saying that again, to reiterate, the CRBs are an optional body established by the locality should they wish to proceed with the establishment. And with the CRBs in place, their decision is a binding decision upon the officer, upon the department, but there is a grievance process that is always afforded to any individual that serves a locality. And while the Law Enforcement Procedural Act is repealed because of the conflict that it poses with the establishment of a CRB, the police agency still has the right, the ability to pursue a grievance process as established by that locality, and that remains firmly in place for anybody, just as it does for any local official.
Further question?
Will the junior senator from Chesterfield yield for one final question?
Will Senator yield?
Assuming that the locality...
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for stepping on you.
No, no worries. Senator's the floor.
Thank you. Mr. President, assuming that that locality adopts a civilian oversight body, and assuming that that locality also permits local bargaining for the law enforcement agency of which is in its jurisdiction, and even in light of what she's saying about the binding nature of a civilian oversight body, but yet if the collective bargaining also includes that the union has oversight or involvement with regard to discipline of a particular officer, if those are in conflict, does her bill, the direct question would be, Mr. President, does her bill directly address that potential conflict issue so that we can, as a body, have confidence that if such circumstances occur, that this civilian oversight body, whatever decision it makes, would be superior and final if it is in conflict with the local union that also has that disciplinary authority?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond by saying the counsel that is available to the CRBs, the counsel that is available to the localities would have to make that determination. The counsel that is available to the CRBs would be established by the local governing bodies. It would be separate from the council members that advise the government officials, but they would have to reach that determination on that legal issue.
Further question?
Mr. President, I thank the gentlelady for her answer. Speaking to the measure.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the body, I think what we see here is obviously the things that need to be ironed out, and why when the senator from Rockingham said, let's take a pause, take a deep breath, and really look at this bill and give it the time that it deserves before we make a decision, is that because this bill does not address a conflict which may occur between allowing localities and local governments to enter into collective bargaining agreements to unionize, allowing law enforcement, now that we've killed that bill, to unionize, and then when we've got a civilian review oversight body, and both may be the union may have bargained for disciplinary authorities, disciplinary rights, administrative procedures, and that when those become in conflict with that civilian oversight body proposed by the senator, how do we resolve that? Well, I think I heard the answer from the junior senator from Chesterfield by saying, well, they'll work that out. The thing that we always know at the local levels, when we pass bills that affect them, they seek our guidance and they seek to have that roadmap contained within the legislation. Otherwise, they are hopelessly in conflict and won't know how to proceed, won't know how to govern itself, won't know which authority has supremacy in determining the discipline of an officer when such misconduct occurs and it's been found to have occurred. That is just one reason why we should take a pause on Senate Bill 5035. And I've listened to this debate, and I've heard from my good friend, the senator from Richmond. He asked, what's the link? I get what you guys are saying on this side. What is the link between what you're saying about these events and attacks against the police and what we're doing in this piece of legislation or the other piece of legislation? And I would respectfully answer, my friend, that the link is that what we are doing here on this floor and in that other body that likes to meet in their living room while they're wearing their pajamas is, quite frankly, demonstrating that at this level that we have a lack of confidence, that this government has a lack of confidence in the law enforcement agencies throughout the Commonwealth that enforce the laws that we pass over and over again. I stood here and told you before that what we are doing here erodes confidence in the law enforcement, and especially in those that wish to conduct and engage in criminal behavior. It emboldens the criminal by the message that we are sending. And I am one that will remind us once again of what we just saw at the beginning of this week on videotape. A coward with a gun run up to an LA Sheriff's Department SUV with two officers that had done nothing to anyone. They were there to protect and to serve in Compton. Ran up, got them to lower the window, and shot them numerous times in the face. Were they the enemy? Are they the enemy? Certainly the organization that we are putting on football fields and on the back of helmets went to the hospital where they were trying to save their lives and said, I hope they effing die. They said, we're running over there, we're going to surround this place where the murderous gang is. The person that shot the video turned it on himself, started laughing. What is that? What do we say? Well, that's California. Well, all I keep hearing here every single time is that while this may not be going on in Virginia, these outside things that have occurred are causing us to take action. Well, what action are we going to take to prevent an officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia, two officers in the Commonwealth of Virginia, from ever having that happen to them? Are they the enemy? Do they deserve to be shot in the face? Because clearly we're saying they're not heroes. No law enforcement anymore is heroes. You know, I remember on 9/11, some 19 years ago, we remembered and revered our first responders. My, how far we have come in 19 years. Now, the hero who saves our country is now the enemy of the state, the enemy of the country, the enemy of the people. Have we lost our ever-loving minds? And we raise our hands and say, well, outside things are making us to do that. Where's the piece of legislation that's going to protect those officers? That female officer, mother, shot in the face. And if you haven't watched the video, struggled to pull her partner, who had been even more grievously injured, out of the car. Drag him to a point of safety, address a tourniquet, and call for help, and put them in a moment of safety to try to save their lives. They're the enemy. They're the murderers. According to the mob, according to the groups that came and tried to rush that emergency room. Are we forgetting that, or do we just turn a blind eye? Ladies and gentlemen, I would submit you are just turning a blind eye because it doesn't fit your narrative. Cops are bad. Now we've gotten even to the point where, in actuality, when a criminal act is happening, when a person during a domestic incident comes out of a door wielding a knife in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, leaving the officers as they backed up, no other opportunity than to defend themselves and to end the threat. And what happens? Lancaster burns. Lancaster burns. Don't say it happens here. June 21st, I do believe, police officer attacked through an open window right over there near the Lee statue. It happens. Was he the enemy? Is he the enemy? Because what we are saying, the message we are now relating to the rest of the Commonwealth of Virginia is that the police are the enemy. The police prevent good law and order. This attitude that we're actually transposing, we're transmitting it through the Commonwealth of Virginia, shows a lack of respect that we have for our law enforcement officials, which allows others to have a lack of respect for them on the ground. Don't think defelonizing an assault and battery on a police officer won't have an effect. It will have an effect. It's already having an effect. And what happened in Compton will happen here. Unfortunately, you can bet on it. And unfortunately, we here in the legislature will reap what we sow. Because we tend to forget. We tend to forget that we're the next layer of law and order. The ladies, the women and men of law enforcement go out every day to enforce those laws you put on the books. Well, if they're not going to respect the enforcement of the law, they're not going to respect the body that makes the law. And you know what we call that? Anarchy. We are allowing mob rule to take over. Anybody willing to stand today in unison and say what happened in Compton is unacceptable, that those two police officers that are recovering from their wounds, thank God, are heroes, not murderers, not the enemy, not the bad guy. The bad guy is the coward that ran up to him and ran away after he's shot. The bad guy is the person who laughs at the injury to that law enforcement, to those law enforcement officers. Because that is the enemy of freedom. Because necessary in a free society, there must be law and order, or if we don't have both, we don't have a free society. You know, quite frankly, I'm going to end by saying this. What I've heard from my good friend, the senator from some part of the eastern part of Fairfax, is this. The guy in the White House has caused the mobs. The guy, our president, has caused these cops to be shot. It's his fault. The guy in the White House has caused the destruction to the property, caused businesses to have to close because it's been burned down. It's Trump's fault. No, it's not. It's a lack of respect for law and order. I said this on the floor before. I deal with it in my practice for 26 years. As it was said in a Shakespearean play, Richard III, when Richard wanted to overtake and control the people, he said the first thing we do is get rid of all the lawyers. People make a joke out of that, but quite frankly, because the lawyers stand between the people and the government that hopes to rule it. So when these things happen, if we believe in law enforcement and if law enforcement acts poorly, because an unconstitutional act against one person by a member of the government is an unconstitutional act against us all, then let's allow the judicial system, what I fight for every day for my clients, to work it out. Because we must believe in law and order. We must condemn anyone that would walk up to a police car in any place on this planet, let alone the United States of America, and shoot them like cowards, to be considered a hero. And that the persons who were victims to be considered the bad guys, as it seems to be or wont to do in the current situation. Mr. President, Senate Bill 5035 starts out with noble cause and noble goals. But it is just another brick in the wall of us demonstrating that we have absolutely no respect for law enforcement, and we are telling the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia, do as you please, they're not important, they're the bad guys. And I respectfully, Mr. President, disagree with that position. Thank you, sir.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator, it's the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to admit that this is the part of the process that we do down here that I still feel very much of an outsider looking in to see how it works. And as I see it, there's a reasonable concept here that there has been concerns about trust between the citizenry and the police based on things that we've all seen nationally. I think we all agree on that, right? And then the next part that I think we agree on is that the public's involvement in the process has the opportunity to improve it and to reconcile some of that distrust that's happened. I think we'd all like to see that. This bill doesn't do that. This bill supplants the authority of discernment about actions and violations of policy to a source outside of the departments that have the expertise. I served on the Board of Medicine for several years before I came here, and I discerned the cases where we considered decisions other physicians had made and decided the consequences for them, but it was an imperative that I understand how medicine was practiced, what it was to provide quality, adequate care, what it was to violate that standard, and I hesitate to think how a potentially emotionally or politically charged civilian review board of physicians would have actually made good decisions in that situation. But they were a part of the decision. There's an opportunity to have advisory boards that make a difference in Virginia to better relationships and to make things better going forward. I've heard today, and I've heard again and again in this session, and maybe in other sessions, but it seems to resonate in this one, that this is going to be okay. Quote, "This is an okay thing to do." Are you kidding me? I'm not here to be okay. I'm not here to make things okay for my citizenry. I'm here to represent and do the right thing. We have a clear imperative as the legislature of Virginia to set guidelines for the localities that allow them to prosper and discern and to use their own discretion in those cases within limits, but not just throwing out wildfire kind of ideas that are going to be okay. Let's just trust them. It's going to be all right. This is inherently flawed. We should not be passing. All of us can agree on this. I know that there are political motivations to make these decisions now. I know that this sounds like it answers something we all think is important, but the details of this bill are not what they purport to be. You all know it. We're doing the wrong thing to pass this bill. I'm going to ask you to do the right thing today and make sure this doesn't pass. And I will just make one more connecting point. If you want to look at how does this bill affect the morale of our police officers, you think about your professional life. And you think about having complete uncertainty on how your actions are going to be reviewed because the people who are reviewing you may have the best interests at heart, but they do not understand anything about the job you do and the information and expertise that goes into that. That uncertainty is going to demoralize your law enforcement community, and it already has. And I think that we need to make really sound decisions here and be careful, and we can do that in a different vehicle than this bill, but not this one. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben, rise?
To speak briefly for the bill.
Senator, has the floor.
I want to thank the junior senator from Chesterfield for bringing this bill forward. And I want to start, though, by addressing some comments from the senator from King George and the senator from Franklin about the tragic shooting of the two officers in Los Angeles the other day. That shooting was despicable, but it was horrific and it should be condemned. But this bill has nothing to do with that. All police are not the same, nor are all those who interact with the police the same. This is a bill about instilling a safeguard that allows the review of unwarranted force, especially when it may be unnecessary and even deadly. We've talked over and over about how we want to separate good police officers from bad police officers. This is a tool to do that, providing oversight, accountability, and elevating trust in our local communities. This bill is not designed to elevate the trust of those of us in this room, per se, but rather among people who've been had interactions with police that have been, in some cases, much less than fair. So with that, I encourage the body to support SB 5035.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly to the bill.
Senator's floor.
I came here today thinking we were going to be making and providing some alternatives for localities to provide different ways of handling police disciplinary matters. And I find myself in the middle of the apocalypse. I hope when the gentleman from Franklin returns that Smith Mountain Lake is not on fire. It is unlikely, but change is difficult, Mr. President, and progress is difficult. And what will happen here is that people will thoughtfully sit down in localities and make determinations here, consulting with their police departments, because that's the way it works. I worked in local government for 30 years and state government for 2.5 years. We sit down, we consult with everybody. There's going to be some really good policies and procedures created as to how these boards will operate. And then what will happen, there'll be a few that turn out to have flaws, that turn out to be, have problems and turn out to be difficult, and they'll be fixed. And one day we'll have a model policy that pretty much everybody can follow that will work for localities to bring accountability, to bring justice to people, but to be transparent and not have everything be determined behind closed doors in police departments. This is a good bill. It is a great start toward making a change by just providing an option for localities to make their own decisions, for communities to make their own decisions about how to do this. We'll learn from each other. This is a good change, and I urge everyone to support it.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from Northern Chesapeake? Senator Spruill rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President and members, this is a good bill. And why is it a good bill? Because something has to be done. If our law enforcement on the whole have been doing their job, we will have none of these bills. And let me talk about this from the black point of view. Regardless of what y'all saying, I could care less. The police department, I do trust the police department, and I trust the sheriff's department. But we will say in the black neighborhood, we say, oh Lord, when will our time come? No one over there have said all these many years that black folks been choked to death by officers. We're not saying anything about that. I'm talking about from the black folks' point of view, heck with everything else. And we do have a good police department. Then we're not saying anything about how many times that blacks been shot in the backs by police officers. We're not saying anything about that. Not that's this year and last year, the riot and loot. Every black person who robbed and loot, burn people's home, they should be thrown in jail and throw the key away. Let's get that straight right now. I do agree that they do have the right to protest. But when, oh Lord, when the blacks concerned, when of all these many years are we saying, when will someone stand up for us, all of us? I want to talk about black folks. Now, when would you stand up and say, hey, it's enough that you keep killing black folks? When is that going to start? Yet we were saying when a police officer gets shot in the face twice, that's wrong, and that person should be thrown in jail and throw the damn key away. We can't make too wrong and make it right. But all these bills we are putting forth now is because the black community is saying we are sick and tired of the law enforcement officers, not all of them, killing black folks, especially our young black folks. And we have to question, will we have another generation of blacks? Our young black folks are being killed by law enforcement. When, oh Lord, will be our time? When will someone stand up for us? That's the problem you're having. Thank God for the body cameras. And the press, I always can say one thing about a black vote, the press put it just like that. We were saying, when will this stuff stop? So we come here today and saying, hey, now someone got to put it on in writing now to make the police officer do what they know what they should do. They know that it's the right thing to do. They know what they should be doing. They are not doing it, not all of them. So I'm here from the black point of view and say, hey, we want to stop choking us black folks to death. We want to stop getting shot in the back. We want to stop getting beat going downtown. We got to stop being hung. It's got to stop. The only way to stop is to say, hey, when, oh Lord, when can we do that? We said, well, we tried everything else. Now let's put it in writing. That's what we're trying to do. And if they haven't been doing their work, what they should be doing, we should need these kind of laws now. So I'm here to this. I'm support this. And in the bill, there's anybody would put forth and saying, if it's telling a police officer this to happen, yes, let's get rid of that too. We don't need to harm our police officers. we still have the right to protest and march. And yes, when I protest and march, if I burn somebody's property down, lock me up. If I destroy a property, lock me up. My job is to protest and saying that we are protesting because we are sick and tired of black folks being killed. That's why we are marching. This other stuff, get rid of it. So I'm asking y'all this. Make the officers do what they're supposed to do. We won't need this kind of stuff. I'm asking y'all, please, help us stop killing black folks. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purposes the senior senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw, rise?
You know, Mr. President, listening to the senator from Franklin County, it was almost as if this bill passes, it's the end of Western civilization as we know it. Fact is, over 200 cities in the U.S. have civilian oversight boards. 200 cities, and some as diverse as 3 cities that I can name: New York, Houston, San Francisco. They all are growing in population. People seem to want to move in there. They're not going to hell in a handbasket. And that won't happen if we pass this bill. It's not going to be the end of the police force. Anybody that's familiar with my record and all the years that I've been here, and then if I thought for 1 second that it would, I wouldn't support the bill. That's not the case here, and it's not the end of the police forces. Believe you me, they'll still be here long after everyone in this room is gone. And, well, maybe except me. You know, it's funny sometimes how previous arguments can come back and bite you in the fanny. Just about a week or 2 ago, we heard on the floor in a debate over a bill that would bar local governments or essentially the establishment of police unions, because they would have so much power that you could never do anything that would interrupt the way they do business. Well, you kind of can't have it both ways. If those unions are as powerful as you claim they're going to be, as some of the people in here claim they're going to be, then probably one of the demands that they're going to make and make stick is no civilian review board. So, you know, like I said, you can't have it both ways. Over 200 cities have these review boards. They're still here. They're still going strong. We got a problem that I think the other 39 of you would have to concede. There is some of a problem in this country with respect to enforcement of law. And you can go through statistic after statistic after statistic, and it's not pretty if you happen to be an African American or a Latino or somebody that doesn't look like 35 of us or 36 of us in this room. And sooner or later, you know, we've got to start making some changes in our society. We're not doing away with the police force, trust me. If I thought for 1 second that this would inhibit their ability to enforce the law, I wouldn't support it. That's not the case. And like I said, we got a pretty severe problem in this country. And the other day, there was an article in the Washington Post. About 80%, 90% of the marijuana arrests, just some huge out of proportion number in Washington, D.C. was the African American community. And you can't tell me that there's not some inherent bias in there. Wouldn't have this problems if we didn't. So I see this bill overall as a plus. Would I have done it a little differently? Perhaps, but we need to start doing something that's positive. And as Senator Spruill pointed out, we got a big problem. This won't cure it, but it'll help. So I would hope that you all would look past some of the rhetoric that we've heard here today and support the bill. It's not the end of civilization. and it's not the end of the police force. Thank you,
Mr. President. With this,
For what
before
purpose,
he
Senator
sits-
from Rockingham, Senator Obenchain rise.
Before he sits down, would the senior senator from Fairfax yield for a question?
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would ask the senior senator from Fairfax, he referenced New York City as one of the localities having a citizens review board. I would ask the senior senator from Fairfax if he is aware of the fact that the New York City Citizens Review Board is not permitted to make binding findings, but only is permitted to refer its findings to the department for the department to decide what, if anything, to do about them.
Senator's floor.
No, I was not aware of that, but I would imagine that with 200 cities, you're going to have a slew of different bills, and that's probably not a bad provision. It's the one part in here that, I've got some issues with, but not enough to make me vote against the bill. But you bring up a good point.
Right. I thank the gentleman.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in favor of the bill.
Thank the senator. You have the floor.
Mr. President, as I've listened to the speakers today, you would believe that those of us who support these police reform measures are anti-law enforcement. Contrary to the fact, most of us have been in love with law enforcement. My first husband, God rest his soul, was a part of the Sheriff's Department in the city of Portsmouth. My one and only son, who met an untimely death, was a part of the Sheriff's Department in Portsmouth. My now grandson has been a part of the Sheriff's Department in Portsmouth. My son, before his death, was in the police academy. My second husband was a lieutenant on the Portsmouth Police Department. I've been in love with law enforcement. I slept with them. So I'm not anti-law enforcement. But for those of us who support these gun control measures, Mr. President, we also understand that there are some bad apples in the police departments all across this nation. And that's what these measures are intended to capture. We don't want to get rid of police departments. We don't want to defund police departments. We want to make them better. And for one person in this body who has been in love with law enforcement, I would say that we need to do something to make sure that black and brown people feel safe when law enforcement is around. That's what these measures are all about. I had not intended to speak because I'm too emotionally tied up in this. But based on my own personal experiences, Mr. President, I can tell you there are a lot of law enforcement agencies across this state and probably around this nation that need some cleaning up. And these kind of measures is the only way we're going to get there. And Mr. President, I don't know whether it's in order or not, but with that statement, I hope that we would just pass the bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise?
Mr. President, I stand in support of this bill. I'm just
Senator
amazed, Mr. President, at the over-the-top rhetoric we're hearing from the other side, talking about what happened in Los Angeles, which was despicable. Somebody shot law enforcement officers in an automobile. That's awful. Anytime there's crime against law enforcement, that's terrible. We should condemn it every way we can. What this is, Mr. President, let's get down to what it really is. Civilian review boards are set up by localities, and localities run the local police. The city council appoints the city manager, who appoints the chief of police. That's typically how it's done in the municipalities and counties. The board of supervisors appoints an administrator, who again appoints the chief of police. It's all under the civilian system. We're a democracy, Mr. President, and that means the people run this country, and they run localities. And if they want to set up a civilian review panel, let them do it. It's strictly enabling. It doesn't do any harm. Many of them don't want to do it. That's fine. But if they want to do it, this gives them the authority to do it if they think it's necessary. They'd like to have more input. Let them do it, Mr. President. That's all this is. Let's not make this any more than it really is. So I suggest we go ahead and get this bill passed so we can move on to other things too. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Do any senators other than the patron wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5035? Seeing none, the junior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Hashmi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with some trepidation, I do want to correct some misinformation offered by my good friend, Senator Stanley. Senator Stanley indicated that William Shakespeare in Richard III stated that we must get rid of all lawyers. Senator Stanley, that quote was actually, in fact, from Shakespeare's Henry VI.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley rise.
Will the senator yield for a question?
Will the senator yield?
Probably not, but please go ahead.
Senator probably yields. The senator has the floor.
I was an English major, but Shakespeare wasn't my favorite class. Was she better at Shakespeare than I was?
Senator has the floor.
Senator Stanley, I taught literature and some English literature for 30 years, so probably yes.
Mr. President.
Further question?
Mr. President, utilizing the words of my friend, the senator from Eastern Fairfax, I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank the senator. Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't belabor this too much longer. We've heard a lot of debate, but I just want to echo this bill is enabling legislation. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. It's not been drafted on the fly. It has, in fact, been developed with the assistance and the collaboration of many people across the state. And these include individuals who have worked with the Charlottesville CRB, individuals in our localities. I would like to share with our good friends, the senator from Henrico, as well as the senior senator from Chesterfield. I've been working with the local groups that have been already in collaboration with their police departments to establish a CRB. Any locality has the opportunity to establish a CRB in the Commonwealth. What this bill is simply doing is giving those CRBs the opportunity to have some degree of authority and to have the power to enact the will of the public. Some of the rhetoric today has indicated that anybody may be seated on these CRBs. It seems to be the thought that we're going to have some local yokels sitting on CRBs, untrained, unprofessional, unguided by any of their own experiences or their professional expertise. And as we full well know, that's simply not the case. It will be a part of the local governing bodies to make those appointments and to do it in collaboration with our law enforcement officials. Finally, Mr. President, I just want to share there is a reason why our founding fathers established civilian oversight over our military. Every one of our civilian presidents has been appointed commander-in-chief. That is a foundational principle of this country, and it's the foundational principle upon which we always have civilian oversight, community oversight over agencies that exert authority and power over us. And with that, Mr. President, I urge that this body pass this measure. Thank you.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall Senate Bill 5035 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 20, noes 15.
Ayes 20, noes 15. Senate Bill 5035 passes.
Senate Bill 5014, a bill relating to minimum training standards for law enforcement officers, crisis intervention team training. Reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute, and from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations with a substitute.
Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Mr. President, I move that the bill be advanced, the bill be advanced to its third reading.
Start with the first substitute.
I apologize. I move that the substitute adopted by the Finance Committee be adopted.
Senator, I want to start with the Committee on Judiciary substitute.
Okay.
With recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move that the substitute adopted by the Committee on the Judiciary with the recommendation that it not be adopted, be adopted.
Thank the Senator. Question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted with a recommendation that it not be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The committee substitute is not adopted. Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Mr. President, with the recommendation that we approve the substitute adopted by the Finance and Appropriations Committee, I move that the substitute be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the substitute from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to. Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Now, Mr. President, I move that the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Regular calendar Senate bills on second reading. Senate Bill 5018, a bill relating to conditional release of geriatric or terminally ill prisoners. Reported from the Committee on Rehabilitation and Social Services with a floor amendment. I'm sorry, the committee substitute has been adopted by the Senate. So we have two floor amendments that are in conflict with each other.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Senator from Loudoun, you want to go here? All right, Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that I would withdraw my floor amendment.
Thank the Senator. Without objection, Senator's floor amendment is withdrawn. Senator from Loudoun County, Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Waive reading of the floor amendment.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from Loudoun County, Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the floor amendment and speaking to the motion.
Senator, the floor.
First, I'd like to say that I thank all the people and the interactions that have gone into the changes with this bill. We made some changes to this bill, as you may recall, in the Finance Committee. Senator Hanger, his comments, I think, were very wise. We took out, through the debate, the wording on disability. And then we had some more discussions here, and I appreciate everyone who was part of it, Senator Newman, Senator Saraval, and others. And frankly, we tried to look at making sure that we did no harm first. And while we wanted to get those who are terminally ill out of prison when they're no threat to society, as I'll reiterate, about 80% of these folks are bedridden, and they're cared for by the Commonwealth at tremendous expense. According to the financial impact, $84,000 per individual for the last 12 months of their life. It's very expensive. One of the key ingredients is to give more time. It's very hard to thread that needle on 3 months for compassionate release. This bill changes it to 12 months. And what this amendment does is it excludes those who are serving a sentence that is convicted in either first or second degree murder. The bill also excludes Class 1 felonies, but this goes a little bit further to take out those who would be first or second degree murderers. And this is, frankly, again, out of abundance of caution and also out of respect to the victims. The key point is this only makes it where the parole board can consider. Doesn't mean they will grant. So with that, Mr. President, I move that the amendment, move adoption of the amendment.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the patron of the bill yield for a question?
Senator Yield?
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
The senator said that these people, because of they are terminally ill, are, to use his words, no threat to society. They're bedridden. They cost $84,000 per person per year, and they're dying. But he went on to say, out of an abundance of caution, we are excluding certain categories. Given that they're bedridden, about to die, and we're only making them eligible for parole, what is the caution that the senator is concerned about so that he creates 3 different categories: Class 1 felony, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder?
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. To my friend, the senator from Richmond, what I would say is certainly harm can come not just through physical. If someone's bedridden, I would say they couldn't cause physical, but from mental. Certainly, history has shown us many first-degree murderers who were able to inflict a great deal of damage mentally. I would hope the many steps that would prevent someone from gaining parole would stop that. But a good example would be Charles Manson. Even if he were bedridden, if he were able to talk and communicate, since he had a history of controlling others, I would still call him a threat to society. In that case, he would not be eligible under this amendment.
Mr. President, would the gentleman yield for another question?
Senator Yield for another question.
Given the Charles
Senator
Manson,
Yield, you have the floor.
Given the Charles Manson example is appropriate, let me ask this. Does the senator agree that a principal in the second degree to first-degree murder can be charged, convicted, and sentenced just as if he or she committed the actual crime?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I think you should always be careful when someone says, would you agree? And in this case, I would say that the fact patterns of each would be different, and I would not agree. I think that first and second degree are very different versus Class 1 and Class 2. So in this case, we have singled out to those who have committed murder specifically, which is obviously a very serious crime. There are differences between first and second degree, but I would not agree. But I do believe this is a measure of caution, and it's a measure, again, out of respect for the victims. Although the people who would be eligible for this compassionate release, and I respect where I think your heart is at, I feel you. On this issue, though, we also have to think of the families of the victims. And seeing a person released who has murdered a loved one, I think could be very painful for them. I will tell you, honestly, I've been conflicted on this, because part of the reason why I think compassionate release makes sense is to allow those who've done wrong to make amends. But in this case, having talked with victims, having victims reached out to myself and colleagues, that's why I made this amendment.
Would the gentleman yield for another question?
Senator Yield?
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Does the senator not agree that somebody can be convicted of first-degree murder but actually not be the person who committed the murder, i.e. pulled the trigger or stabbed the person? Does the senator understand that?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I do understand that, and what I would say to the gentleman is I think that's a different situation. We're talking about a right or wrong conviction. What we're talking about here is compassionate release of the terminally ill who have been convicted, not debating whether the conviction was righteous or not.
Mr. President, speaking to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I thank the senator for his patroning this bill. I believe in compassion and mercy. But what I disagree with in the strongest way possible is excluding groups. This bill started off by excluding a Class 1 felony, somebody convicted of capital murder. Then Senator Serville introduced legislation that would exclude somebody convicted of first-degree murder. Then the patron of the bill added another exclusion, somebody convicted of second-degree murder. Well, that would capture the following person. Not too far from this science museum, a young lady who was a co-ed at Virginia Union University, has a boyfriend that decides who's involved in drug dealing, and she drives him knowing that he has a gun, to a location, aids and abets him by driving that car, and he kills somebody. That gentleman that killed can be convicted of first-degree murder, and the woman can be convicted, and in many jurisdictions in this state is convicted of first-degree murder. That person is now ineligible when she has served 60 or 50 years in prison and is dying, is terminally ill. She's not eligible for parole. Second-degree murder, which Senator Servo and others in the room know, is any murder that is not capital murder or first-degree murder, is now also under this amendment ineligible for consideration. If we believe, which I believe many, if not everybody in this room does, we believe in forgiveness, we believe in atonement for our transgressions and our sins, if we believe in second chances, if we believe redemption is good, then why would we exclude one individual, be they convicted of first-degree murder or second-degree murder, who is lying in their deathbed, as the senator says, bedridden? Why wouldn't we let them go home and die with their own family? I don't know why we would exclude any group. And for that reason, and I realize I may be the only one who votes against this amendment, but I'm asking other people to agree with me. If you believe in forgiveness and mercy, then you would reject this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman, rise?
Mr. President, speaking briefly, Mr. President, I
Senator,
appreciate the senator from Fairfax, Senator Bell, working with Senator from Fairfax, Senator Servo, and I and others on trying to work forward a bill that can have bipartisan support, also taking into account the concerns those have that those that have committed either first, second-degree murder could have on a community as well. Mr. President, I hope that we would support the amendment.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendment? Senator from Loudoun County, Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's always hard to draw the line to say who to include and who not to include. I would argue that the most heinous crime would be killing, the taking of another life. And that's where the line was drawn here. But this bill, compassionate release of those who are dying, those who have paid their debt to society for an extended period of time, I think it's a good thing. We all have different faiths that move us, that bring us to decisions here. It's part of who we are. It makes up our core. And if I read the verse from Ezekiel 13, 14 through 16, again, though I say to the wicked, you shall surely die. Yet if he turns from his sin and does what is just and right, and if the wicked restores the pledge, gives back what he has taken by robbery, walks in the statute of life, not doing injustice, he shall surely live, he shall not die. None of the sins that he has committed shall be remembered against him. He has done what is just and right, he shall surely live. And with that, I ask that we pass this amendment.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted. Senator from Loudoun County, Senator Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be engrossed and move to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5017, a bill relating to local correctional facility definition, reported from the Committee on Rehabilitation and Social Services with amendments, and from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations, and there is a floor substitute.
Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through this floor amendment, I was hoping to have a collaborative, cooperative arrangement with ICE around facility inspections during a pandemic, but recent policy decisions made by senior management at ICE only allows members of Congress, the Senate or the House of Representatives, to enter a facility during a pandemic. So it makes my floor amendment inoperative, and I would ask that it be withdrawn.
Thank the senator. Without objection, the floor substitute will be withdrawn.
Yeah. I know, but we were here when we left.
Mr. President?
From Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko.
Thank you. If we could go back to the original amendment that came through the committees, with the recommendation that the committee reject the committee amendments, I move the amendments be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The senator from Arlington wish to be heard?
Not yet.
Okay. Not yet. Okay. Thank the
Gotta
senator.
get
Any
this
other
done
senators wish to be
first.
heard? Seeing none, with the recommendation that they be rejected, the question is, shall the committee amendments be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
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 The noes have it. The committee amendments are rejected. Senator from
We have floor amendments from Senator Favola.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I wish to be heard. My floor amendment essentially covers the different sections of the code related to inspections. Excuse me.
No, it's okay. This is
Mr. President, I move that the reading of the amendments be waived.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendments be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendments is waived. Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the amendments be agreed to in speaking to the motion.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. What my amendments do, they capture many of the sections that the Rehab and Social Services Committee amended when the bill was before us, with the exception of one section, which is really the meat of my amendment. My amendment removes Virginia Code Section 53.1-70, and what that section does is it had extended judicial jurisdiction over decisions or orders from the local and regional correctional boards, and it also brought in localities into the litigation. So hearing the debate on the floor this past Thursday, it became very obvious that I think this body is eminently interested and believes there is a public interest in having Virginia go into the Farmville Center, understand what's going on, and ensure that infectious diseases are contained. But going beyond that in terms of any litigation or an enforcement tool, there was no appetite for that, and we heard that, we understood that, and that's what my amendment does. I do think the other parts of my amendment, which came out of Rehab and Social Services, are incredibly important. What this bill does is it merely enables Virginia to step up to the plate and, I would argue, meet the standard that ICE has for its detention facilities. ICE clearly articulates in their standards that facility operators need to come up with a plan for containing contagious diseases, and that plan must include cooperation with the state and local governments or state and local bodies. I think there's an acknowledgement that public health is actually managed at the local level. We do follow guidelines that are established at the federal level by the Centers of Disease Control, but in terms of boots on the ground and ensuring that best practices are actually followed, it's your local level that does that. So with that explanation, Mr. President, I hope it is the desire of the body to adopt my amendments. Thank you.
Thank the senator. Oh.
No,
Anything else? Okay. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendments? Senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment came at the work of a large number of members of this body, and I urge the body to support the floor amendment. Thank you.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the floor amendments be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendments are adopted. Senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko.
Mr. President, I move the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5034, a bill relating to release of prisoners, reported from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations with a substitute.
Senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the amendment of the nature of the substitute adopted by the Finance Committee be agreed to and waive the reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. Senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just speaking to the bill, I know we have discussed this at length, and
Senator, we were just engrossed in advance.
great. I move we gross in advance to the third reading.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5038, a bill relating to mobile crisis co-response team programs, reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute and from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations with a substitute.
Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the recommendation that the substitute from Judiciary be rejected, I move the substitute be agreed to.
Thank the senator. With the recommendation that it be rejected, the question is, shall the substitute from the Committee on the Judiciary be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The committee substitute is rejected. Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee substitute from the Finance and Appropriations be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to. Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Mr. President, I move that the bill be engrossed in advance to its third read.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5118, a bill to require certain utilities to develop an emergency debt repayment plan, reported from the Committee on Commerce and Labor with a substitute and from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations with amendments.
The senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the substitute offered by the Committee on Commerce and Labor be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the substitute from the Committee on Commerce and Labor be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to. The senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the amendments offered by the Committee on Finance and Appropriations be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to. Senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be engrossed and passed to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Memorial Resolution, Senate Resolution 540, celebrating the life of Lori Lee Brickley.
Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask that this memorial resolution go by for the day, as some members may want to sign on. This is the wife of former Delegate David Brickley, and I do have a co-patron add-on if those would also like to. So I'd ask that it be passed by for the day, for the opportunity for others to sign on. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Without objection, Senate Resolution 540 will go by for the day.
Commending resolutions, Senate Resolution 541, commending Strike Fighter Squadron 213. Senate Resolution 542.
The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins.
Mr. President, I move that the commending resolution be agreed to.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall Senate Resolution 541 be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Resolution 541 is agreed to.
Senate Resolution 542, commending Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Simeon Vindman, United States Army, retired.
Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline.
Mr. President, can Senate Resolution 542 go by for the day, please?
Without objection. Without objection. Senate Resolution 542 will go by for the day. The senior senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I require the clerk to complete the calendar.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Senate Journal reflect that my friend, the senator from Spotsylvania County, is away on pressing personal business?
Thank the senator. The Journal will so reflect. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Mr. President, point of personal privilege, sir.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I am going to extend an invitation to Madam Clerk to redistribute the list that you had previously shared with us, which lists the appropriate salutation for each senator. Madam Clerk knows that I've had conversations with her, Mr. President, about the incremental erosion of some of the protocol that we once upon a time adhered to in the Senate of Virginia to maintain collegiality and civility, and I will spare you that tonight. But today it's been increasingly apparent that we have backed up and are insistent on referring to senators by their names as opposed to the localities, and I think that is a tradition worth preserving, so perhaps if Madam Clerk would redistribute that list, we would have greater compliance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, the clerk will report the announcements on the desk. Up. Okay, the clerk will report the announcements on the desk.
Tomorrow, September 16th, the Committee on Commerce and Labor will meet Wednesday, September the 16th, 2020 at 9:00 a.m. at the Science Museum. Commerce and Labor tomorrow, 9 a.m. in the Science Museum. The public may view it on the General Assembly website where it will be streamed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Seeing none, call the senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Mr. President, the Judiciary Committee will meet immediately after the session at 10 o'clock here in the Science Museum. And we have about 17 House bills to deal with. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Seeing none, call the senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.